But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from of old, from everlasting. This is a prophecy that was uttered by Micah, the prophet, some 700 years before the time of Christ, 700 BC. And in uttering this prophecy, he predicted the city in which the ruler of Israel would be born. The eternal ruler, the one from whom his goings forth are from of old, from everlasting, the pre-existent one, the Messiah himself, was to be prophesied. It was prophesied that he was to be born here in Bethlehem. Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall have this honor of being the birthplace of the Messiah. What an amazing prophecy. God predicted 700 years in advance where Jesus would be born. I was reading a while back, and I happened to read this in the San Francisco Chronicle. It ran a list of the top 10 disappointments for tourists. Number 1 was the Polo Lounge in Hollywood. Number 2 was some gaudy casino in Monaco. Number 3 on the list was a little town of Bethlehem.
Really?
The number 3 biggest disappointment in the world of tourism. I like to refer to it not as old little town of Bethlehem, but old lousy town of Bethlehem. Or baby old littered town of Bethlehem, if you drive through Bethlehem proper. Let me show you why we don't go to the Church of the Nativity. Here's a picture from a few years ago of a Christmas celebration at the church in the Nativity. See that? The priests are fighting each other.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just what they would do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It happens almost every year.
Yeah.
The priests fight each other. They're debating over whether the Franciscans or the Orthodox or the Armenians, where their church ends and where the other one begins. And they're swinging sticks and they're fighting each other every year. It's crazy. It's chaotic. And yet, you know, that's really the way Bethlehem might have been that very first Christmas. It was pretty chaotic. It was pretty crazy. There may have been fistfights in the streets. It was just a tiny town, just a blip on the screen. As Micah said, "O Bethlehem, though you are little among the thousands of Judean cities." It was a very little place. It was a tiny place, but because of the census, it had an influx of people and citizens, and the town was packed. And there was chaos in the streets, and there was a lot going on. And of course, we know the story, how that when Joseph got there, they went to the hotel, and Mary said, "You did make reservations, didn't you?" And Joseph said, "Oy vey." "Oh, I forgot. I knew I forgot something." And then they ended up in a stable. Of course, you know the story. But isn't it interesting that God, He could have chosen Jerusalem as the birthplace of His Son. He predicted 700 years in advance that it would be Bethlehem. Could have chosen Jerusalem. Could have chosen one of the great capitals of the world. He could have chosen the intellectual capital of Alexandria down in Egypt. Or he could have chosen Rome, the pinnacle of power. But no, he chose a little bitty, little lousy town on the outskirts of Jerusalem, a little town of Bethlehem. That's the place that he chose. And you know what? I think in doing so, I think he was making a statement to all of us. That Jesus is not afraid to come to the other side of the railroad track, so to speak. You know, one day we have been guaranteed an eternal home in heaven. And how glorious it's going to be. But did you know that before we receive that eternal heavenly home, Jesus made a point, God made a point of coming to our home and making our home His home. That Jesus would come to this little town on such a crazy, chaotic night in such a dirty, ratty, lousy place says that there is nowhere that he won't invade and that he won't come to spread his love and light. You remember the hymn? Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. There were dark streets here, no doubt about it. In more ways than one, there were dark streets. And yet the eternal light shine in those dark streets. Jesus came to the hood. That's what it says. I love the Message. If you've ever read the Message, which is it's a paraphrase of the Bible, but it paraphrases John 1 verse 14. And the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. I like that. Jesus came to the hood. He came to the rough side of the tracks, to the downcast, and to the depressed, and to the little places. There are several translations of this word, in Micah's prophecy. Though you are little among the thousands of Judah. Here's how one Bible translates it. Though you are a small village in Judah. Another one. Though you are tiniest of the townships in all Judah. Another one. Though you are least of the clans in Judah. God deliberately chose a lousy little town as the birthplace for His Son to prove that every other town is a candidate for His presence and for His glory and for His work. That He's not afraid to become a resident in your home, in your neighborhood, in your heart. To me, it's so beautiful that Jesus came to a place in Bethlehem. And He chose for His Son to be born, not in the hospital nearby, not or surrounded by doctors, not surrounded. Really, you would have expected that. But no, this was all about, the birth of Christ was all about how low God would go to prove His love to us and to let us know of His mercy and His grace toward us. That the God in heaven was willing to humble Himself and to become one of us. And in essence, as Jesus said later, I've come to serve. I've come to be a servant. And I want you to follow in my example. And that's so evident right here in this place. And so I really like this place. This is really indicative of where Mary would have given birth. There were no stables in those days, to my understanding, that we think of as stables. They were all in caves like this. And to be in a place this authentic, this is pretty cool, I think. This is a much more authentic looking field than the Church of the Nativity there in Bethlehem. So we're privileged to be here. Hey, let's sing a Christmas carol. Let's sing A Little Town of Bethlehem. Give it a shot.
Oh, little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
How about joy to the world?
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare Him room. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of His righteousness, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love, and wonders